Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great honor to be here, and of course I'm extremely moved by the stories that happen to your community, to your brothers and sisters, because they are real, and to see in front of me real people and real story it really gives me courage to try to do something. And one of ways of helping you is to help you understand your rights, because you have rights. All of us, we have rights. And first of all, these rights, they are defined, for instance, by Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's already a long time. It's a document which says universal, and universal means all of us. Every human being has a freedom of belief, or even in a more large sense, freedom of consciousness. I have a right to be atheist. I have a right to believe in God. It's my right, and it must be protected. And universal means that all the countries of the world, all the states of this planet must respect the human rights. And the situation that we find us right now shows clearly that you were prohibited to have this right, to exercise this right. So, and my wish today, it will be perhaps a little bit complicated, but my wish today is to help you give the definitions in the international documents, international law, that is, all the countries they must follow, to understand and to remember definitions. And these definitions are your rights. And in those definitions is said everything. So, and the first definition that I want to show you is, as you see in the first paragraph, that Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 14, says that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. It's very important for you to remember that. And every time that somebody is trying to deny you this right, you should keep in mind, you have the right. It's written in Universal Declaration of Human Rights that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. And then I'm coming back, because I didn't start it from the background, that the biggest refugee crisis in our human history was after the Second World War, mainly because of the Second World War in Europe. That at that time it was a massive, 60 million refugees. It was a massive flow of people around the world. And to manage that crisis, it was created a convention relating to the status of refugees. It was in 1951. And in 1950, the 1 year before, to deal with this enormous problem, United Nations created United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And to this very day, this institution still exists. And the actual Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, for many years, he was the High Commissioner for Refugees. So he knows the plight, and he knows all the struggles that refugees are meeting around the world. But as the Convention of 51 was created mainly to deal with the refugee flows from Europe, and later this problem was solved, but everybody saw that the problem of refugees is not ended, that there are different reasons why people they're traveling, there are different reasons why the people they seek the asylum abroad. And in 1967 it was adopted a protocol relating to the status of refugees. And for your information, it's very important information for you, that both China and the Republic of Korea, they are signatories, and of these two essential documents, which means that if a state signs and ratifies an international document, they abide by the requirements of these documents. So meaning that in actual situation, so it's like perhaps from China it's difficult to require because very often this country is not following any rules, only their own rules. So it's perhaps difficult to oblige them to follow the norms. But at least the Republic of Korea, which is a democratic and well-respected country, perhaps they should remember their duties under these documents. So, and in the convention that we mentioned, there is a very long definition. It's very legal, complicated document. So, which says that any person, owing to well-founded fear of being persecuted, for reasons of race, religion, nationality, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear or for reasons other than personal convenience, is unwilling to avail himself of the persecution of that country, or for reasons other than personal convenience, is unwilling to return to it. It's very complicated, and to translate that in a more human way of saying the same thing is to say that a refugee is a person who is outside of its own country's territory only for fear of persecution on protected grounds, meaning that somebody who would like to stay in his own country, but there is a real persecution possibilities, that person is seeking the protection outside. And these protected grounds include race, caste, nationality, religion, political opinions, and membership and/or participation in any particular social group or social activities. You see that the grounds for which the refugee status can be grounded is very large. Because as Professor Massimo Introvini explained, that, for instance, to define religion is good or is not good, is cult, is not cult, is debated, right? So it's my understanding from the legal, from the international law, is not even important to define, are you a religious group or you're not a religious group? You are a group, you're a social group, you're a political group, you're a religious group. The problem is that you are persecuted as a group. So, and that persecution is enough, because you don't have to prove that it's like you are good, you are bad, etc. It's clear that you are persecuted as a group. And that is very important for you to remember. And another thing which is crucial for you to remember, and in the case of a lady who made a testimony, that international law, one of the crucial the principles is non-refoulement, which means, in English it doesn't even exist the precise word, it's a French word, which means that if you know that a person might run any risk for security, for health, and well-being, you cannot reject the person. Because the story that you shared with us, it shows that you clearly know, you have facts already, that if you go back to China, you will be arrested, and we don't know what will happen to you. So the humanitarian principle that is obliged for everybody, you cannot reject a person when you know that person might be persecuted. And what is said is very important for you to remember, and for the human rights activists as well. Running through victims of persecution to their persecutors is an odious, meaning it's a very strong word, it's odious violation of a principle called non-refoulement. So it's a crime. So For you, it's very important because when you make your cases, when you defend your rights, you should remember that. Let's go further. Oh, what is persecution? Also, there is an international definition, internationally agreed definition. What is persecution? And persecution is the systematic mistreatment of an individual or a group by another individual or group or state. The most common forms are religious persecution, racism, and political persecution. You see, religious persecution goes even in the first place. It's the most common crime committed in this world. The inflicting of suffering, harassment, imprisonment, internment, fear, or pain are factors they may establish persecution. Let's read again. The inflicting of suffering, harassment, imprisonment, internment, fear, or pain are factors that may establish persecution. Though there is one warning, that is, but not all suffering will necessarily establish persecution, because persecution is very conscious, intentional deed. It's not something that just like person did something and another person is suffering is persecution. Persecution is very systematic, very intentional, and having a clear goal to achieve certain things, then it's persecution. So I believe you identify your cases in that, because it's a systematic. It's not something that happened somewhere. Somebody assaulted me on the street and I say I'm persecuted because I'm Lithuanian. I cannot say it, right? But when it's systematic, it's already, it shows. It has the signs of persecution. Though the suffering experience by the victim is sufficiently severe. And the problem is the threshold of severity, though, has been a source of much debate. But it really doesn't apply to your case, because here, this reservation is in the cases we shall call or we shall not call the cases, in fact, for the war crimes or crimes against humanity, because those are the highest level of persecution and the crime. And you see that in the actual world, for instance, what is happening, let's say, in Syria or in Iraq, is here we are talking very often about the war crimes, so it's much higher. But you don't need it's not your case. I'm just showing you the scope of different of various scenarios. So, but the problem is that, not problem, but the fact is that in your case, is clearly there is a persecution. So for you, it's to collect enough of evidence and to present them in a compiled version. So, and then another is even higher evil is the torture, because the persecution might be still a social persecution, discrimination, denial of your social rights. So it might be mild version of persecution, but the higher is torture. And what you said in both of your cases is clearly a torture. It's the higher level of the crime. So then, as you see the definition, because I'm insisting on definitions, is that torture is the act of deliberately inflicting physical or psychological pain in order to fulfill some desire of the torturer or to compel some action from the victim. Torture, by definition, is a knowing and intentional act, as a persecution as well. Deeds which unknowingly or negligently inflict pain without a specific intent to do so are not typically considered torture. And it's to show you that in your case, it's clearly a torture. It's not just like simple pleasure to inflict the pain to you. Torture can be carried out or sanctioned by individuals, groups, and states. And you see in the second part, you see very important aspects that they are applicable for you. Reasons for torture may include punishment, revenge, Political education, I believe, is very much applicable to your case. Deterrence, coercion of the victim or a third party, interrogation to extract information, or a confession, irrespective of whether it is false. So, very important is just to remember that torture is prohibited. It's against international law. Any state is not allowed to exercise torture. And of course, it's a serious violation of human rights. And as the international law, international community has 1987 United Nations Convention against torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. And this convention has been signed and ratified by China in 1808 and by Korea in 1995. And under that convention, torture means any act by which severe pain and suffering, whether physical or mental, it's not only physical, but mental is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or confession, punishing him for an act he or a third person committed, or intimidating or coercing him or a third person, or for any other reason based on discrimination of any kind, when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of or with the consent of or acquiescence of a public official, another person acting in an official capacity. It does not include pain or suffering arising only from, inherent in, or incidental to lawful sanctions, which is not applicable in your case. So, and another element which is very important for you to remember, do not return victims to persecutors. And it's exactly in this convention that I just mentioned, the Convention on 1987, Article 3 stipulates, no state party shall expel, return, which means refouler, or extradite a person to another state where there are substantial grounds for believing that he or she would be in danger of being subjected to torture. For the purpose of determining whether there are such grounds, the competent authorities shall take into account all relevant considerations, including, where applicable, the existence in the state concerned of a consistent pattern of gross, flagrant, or mass violations of human rights. And I believe there is no need to try to prove, everybody knows that China is the best example of violation, of gross violations of human rights. Religious persecution is a systematic mistreatment of individual or group due to their religious affiliation. And that is very important for you to remember. Religious persecution is a human right problem. It's not about religion. It's not about your belief, what you don't believe. It's about your human rights. And in the actual world, it's just that up to 80% of all acts of persecutions are directed against people of Christian faith. So I will not go deeper in what is the religion, because it's already the professor in Trevania talked extensively about it, and it's more scholar debate what is religion, what is not religion. Because my point that I'm making that it's very important not to forget that it's a part of human rights, and the debate about is religion, is not religion is the secondary. The primary aspect is just to defend your rights. So, and it is sometimes when there is a question, when there is the specific cases, should a specific group or members of the specific group, should they be given or should be they granted the refugee status? In some cases, sometimes there are debates in some countries that you should prove that you are religious enough, or that you're really practicing your religion, and etc. So, and for that reason, in 2004, UNHCR, as mentioned, the High Commissioner for Refugees, they developed specific guidelines to help member states to define, and the conclusion was that a special religious fervor, or knowing well one's religion is not required. If you belong to a specific group which is already discriminated, you have the right to have the refugee status. And in that case, even infants can be religion-based refugees. The test refers to the point of view of the prosecutor, and the question is whether the applicant is or would probably be persecuted because of his or her religion. Not everything is very easy, because there are a lot of people who try to obtain the refugee status. And a lot when you now, I believe recently, like year or 2 years, the media was even, now it's a little bit less, but at some point all of us were bombarded by the terrible news how the poor refugees, they tried to knock the doors of European Union. Of course, you saw it. And the terrible Europeans, they are not opening their doors, and etc. So it's not entirely true, the messages that we were getting. For some reason, media was playing the game that just trying to use the Syrian crisis, and remember the boy who was found on the shore, dead, saying that he was Syrian, so etc. But the problem is that in reality, this massive going of people to Europe, these scary images, the reality is, and it's very politically it's very difficult to say, it's becoming more and more acceptable, but for a while it was very politically incorrect to say that most of these people, they have nothing to do with refugees. They are simple economical migrants from many countries around the Mediterranean Sea. But they were playing in front of the cameras. They playing the poor Syrian refugees and playing the card of the refugees. So it's now, in particular, Europe is overflowed by. It's not already thousands. We can already say millions of people who claim to have rights to the refugee status, and they don't. So for the states, it's a very difficult job, is to really to go into every single case and to define. So it's a long job. And also it goes also for the people who claim that they have the religious grounds why they are claiming the asylum status in Europe. So, for instance, one of the cases is that sometimes people dissimulate their religious identity, or even on the way that they don't want to be sent back to their homes, they convert and they say, now I will be discriminated, and etc. So sometimes there are cases. It's not your case. They just show that sometimes for the states it's very difficult to finally to go to the bottom of the situation and take a decision. So for that reason, in the same 2004 UNHCR guidelines, it said that cases should be examined individually for credibility, but without placing excessive burdens on the asylum seekers. Test on theological proficiency and etc. But the point, it's not your case, but just to tell that sometimes states they have difficulties. They take some time and etc. to understand if a person is can be granted the asylum case. So I will not go too deep into how strong should the persecution be, because I believe in your case it's quite clear. So there is very little doubt that persecution is going on, is systematic, is severe. So it's, but there are cases in other situations. Only that the good thing is that in Europe we have European Court of Justice. So and the victims who were discriminated to be granted the refugee status, they can put the plaint and they can have the reparations, and the decision might be changed. So the same goes for discrimination, because, for instance, it's like the specific case in 2013. It was about the Egyptian Copts. So because the discrimination was that they were allowed to practice their religion. So they have discrimination. It's not. They have just discriminated. It's not anymore true right now, because it's more complicated. Became more complicated. But a certain time, some years before, they were discriminated because they were Copts, and they cannot really freely practice their religion. So that the most often is that, as also Professor Trevino already talked quite extensively, I will not repeat that, is that very often that what is really like interfering is how states they try, instead of accusing religious group of practicing or preventing practicing their religion, but they more like concentrating on accusing the common crimes. And there are plenty of different cases. Yeah, it's like few cases also about other groups in Europe and in everywhere else, is they're trying to fight some religious movements as evil cults, as Professor already told us. So it was a specific case. It was about the Scientology. So when, for instance, Scientology in Germany and Uzbekistan, they could not really practice their religion, and then courts in the United States in 1997 and in Australia in 2012, they granted refugee status to Scientologists. So as I said, it's beautiful to have international documents. It's much more difficult to put them in practice. It's very often the case, and it's the same case with refugee law. And your case in particular shows that is the main challenge: is how to make countries to apply the norms that they assigned with the international documents. And the problem with the conventions and the protocol that I mentioned is that there is no internationally agreed standards of implementation. Which in normal people's word means that every country decides nationally how they implement the law, the convention, the international agreements. So even European Union, which is very much advanced in 28 states, still we don't have the unified way of implementing these international documents. So even less the other countries. But the good way is that when some countries, they are very concerned about their reputation. So normally if they are presented with the good arguments, they very often they accept. The most important is to really present them with the good arguments, with the well-based case. So unfortunately, because we should expect, and I myself would have expected more, that the High Commissioner for Refugees because normally this office is in every country around the world. So it should be your ally in trying to help you. But in fact, they don't have this authority of enforcement. So you can try to get the good advice from them and good guidance, but they are not really the policemen of the implementation of the convention. So there is International Court of Justice, but International Court of Justice functions in a way that one state presents a complaint against another state, and that is very unlikely that somebody will take the risk to get in problems with China. So we understand that. And for if a person wants to present a complaint, so normally it should go through the United Nations Human Rights Committee. So in the level of International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. And there is another organ, is the organ of the United Nations in New York, is called ECOSOC. It's Economical and Social Committee, where also the complaint of a person or group might be submitted. So perhaps that is the way to see if something can be done. And for the moment, is like the way to go forward for you is trying to a little bit to make more publicity about your cases, because quite effectively, I'm not suggesting, I'm just like from the general observation, I'm saying that sometimes the public shaming in the press and media is quite effective. But I'm not talking about the extreme actions in it, but drawing the attention, making known the cases, and defending your rights is something that might be done. So then also, if like you will get at some point that United Nations will be involved and they will condemn that, it will be very extremely effective, abstractive way of getting the results. And another level that they didn't put in my slide, it would be also to work with the human rights lawyers, because there are such a category of people who defend the rights of people, and they know the ways how to function in this complicated world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.